Hebrews, Hebrews, Hebrews. This is our Prophets of Awakening. It's our evening Shabbat class. We're going to close Sabbath out. It's the 3rd of March, the 8th, 2025. The topic I'll be talking about is Nehemiah, in the book of Nehemiah, and how the Sabbath had been altered. We're going to look at that and compare it to what's going on today. So with that being said, go to our YouTube channel, The Prophets of Awakening. Check out our videos, okay? We have over 1,000 or so videos that you can look at,
Pebbles.
examine the scriptures, and get the meat out. And if you like what you're hearing and receiving, I'm asking you to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It'll be greatly appreciated, okay? We have our cash app for anybody that wants to support the channel, help it move along, okay? Our hours of operation, Tuesday and Wednesday, 7 to 9 p.m. Central Time. Then we have a men's advanced Bible study on Friday night, 7 to 9. We have 2 Shabbat classes, one in the morning from 10 to 12 a.m. Central Time. Then we have one in the evening from 6 to 7 p.m. Central Time. Then we close out the Shabbat. And then we have a Sunday class, which is an advanced Bible study from 5 p.m. Central Time every Sunday. So any of those times you feel the need to engage, you're welcome, okay? For those that don't know, this is a non-Messianic channel. We deal with the Tanakh and the Torah. Tanakh being the Old Testament, so-called Book of Remembrance, and the Torah is the first 5 books of the Old Testament that were given to Moses by our Redeemer, the Lord of Hosts. Okay, shalom and welcome to this channel, and welcome to our evening Shabbat class. We're gonna do our normal, which is a moment of silence, prayer, psalms. We have some current events, some need to know information. We'll open it up for anybody with any questions or comments, and then we'll go into our topic, which is Nehemiah and the Shabbat, right? And then we pick a scripture if anybody wants to, and we'll break that down at the end of the class. Okay? The moment of silence is for the Lord of Hosts, and all that he's doing to bring about our prophesied deliverance in these last days. Okay? The Lord, righteousness and uprightness belongeth unto thee. Therefore we come before thee at this hour, seeking thy face, looking for righteousness and uprightness, that we may walk before thee as thy servant David and Solomon, Samuel, and Hezekiah did. For we desire to walk after thee, O Lord, and to keep your commandments, testimony, your statutes with all our heart and soul, to perform the words of the covenant that was written down by your prophets. O Lord, allow thy face to shine upon thy people, and hear our plea, hear and do, O Lord, and hide not thy face from us any longer, for we need you so very much at this hour. Peace be unto you. Somebody line is open. Okay, that being said, read the song real quick. I'll read Psalms 113. God's mercies are many. Praise ye, Lord. Praise, O ye servants of the Lord. Praise the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord from the time forth and forevermore. From the rising of the sun unto the going down of the same, the Lord's name is to be praised. The Lord is high above all nations, and his glory above the heavens. Who is likened unto the Lord, our God, who dwelleth on high, who humbleth himself to behold the things that are in heaven and in the earth. He raises up the poor out of the dust, and he lift up the needy out of the dunghill, that he may set him with princes, even with the princes of his people. He maketh the barren women to keep house, and to be a joyful mother of children. Praise ye the Lord. Okay, when I read this, or I think I read it last week, but when I read this, you can see that Oh, the Lord of hosts is, like I said in verse 3, it says, from the rising of the sun to the going down of the same, the Lord's name is to be praised. And so if you precept that and go to Ezekiel 23, Exodus 23 and 20, Yahweh tells us the Israelites obey this angel, for my name is in him. Right? So that name, what people not connecting the dots with that, the name is this angel. That's the name that has to be lifted up. And you keep going and it says, the Lord is high above the nations, and his glory is above the heavens. Then here you go. 5. Who is likened unto the Lord our God, who dwelleth on high? Now here you go. 6. Who humbleth himself. So why is he humbling himself? Yahweh, you're looking at what Yahweh did. So it says, who humbles himself to behold the things that are in heaven and in the earth. So why would Yahweh humble himself for something he created and his handiwork? No, it's the Lord of hosts humbling himself. Okay. So anyway, any comments or questions on that? Okay. So with that being said, got some current events. Like I said, I'll play them and then we'll
Or how Russian investments in Africa are shaking up the balance of power and challenging the influence of the West. From natural resources to arms deals, Russia's growing presence is shifting power dynamics across the African continent. We'll dive into the sectors where Russia is making bold moves, the impact on African nations, and why the West is closely watching these developments. Stick around as we uncover the fascinating changes shaping Africa's future. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss insightful content like this. Understanding the Russian-African connection. To understand Russia's growing influence in Africa today, we must first look back at the Cold War era. During this time, the Soviet Union established strong relationships with many African nations, supporting various liberation movements across the continent. Russia provided military aid, financial assistance, and political backing to newly independent African countries. These relationships were based on mutual interests, Africa's potential as a geopolitical partner, and the USSR's desire to expand its influence in the global South. However, after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Russia's presence in Africa faded. For a long time, the continent seemed to lose its importance in Moscow's foreign policy. But as the 21st century progressed, a shift occurred. Russia began rebuilding its global stature, and Africa, with its vast resources, emerging markets, and strategic importance, was once again on Russia's radar. Fast forward to today, and we see Russia making strong inroads across various sectors in Africa, with its presence growing and challenging the West's dominance in the region. But why is Russia suddenly so focused on Africa again? The continent's strategic importance has increased significantly over the years. With vast natural resources such as gold, oil, diamonds, and critical minerals, Africa is a prime target for countries looking to secure access to valuable commodities. Additionally, Africa's young and growing population, expected to double by 2050, presents an enormous market for goods and services. Russia, aiming to reassert its global influence, sees Africa as a key partner in its geopolitical strategy. This marks the beginning of a new phase in Russia-Africa relations, one that could shift the balance of power across the continent.
We know you have choices when it comes to home improvement products.
Any comments so far?
Strategic investments in Africa. Now, let's break down the areas where Russia has been making its mark. In Africa, these investments can be classified into three main sectors: natural resources, arms trade, and political maneuvering. Each of these sectors plays a vital role in Russia's strategy for deepening its ties with African countries. Natural resources. Africa is home to some of the richest mineral deposits in the world. From uranium to diamonds, gold to rare earth metals, the continent holds invaluable resources that are crucial to the global economy. Russia, with its strong mining industry, has made significant investments to tap into this wealth. Take Zimbabwe. For example, Russia has invested heavily in the country's platinum mining sector, which holds vast reserves of the precious metal. Platinum is used in various industries, including automotive and electronics, and its demand continues to rise. Globally, Russian companies are eager to gain a foothold in Zimbabwe's rich platinum reserves to meet this growing demand, strengthening its ties with the continent. During the summit, Russia signed numerous deals worth billions of dollars, covering sectors like energy, infrastructure, and technology. A key example of Russia's political strategy is its relationship with the Central African Republic, KR. Russia has provided the KR government with military training, security assistance, and even deployed its private military contractor, the Wagner Group, to provide security services. This partnership shows how Russia's influence in Africa goes beyond trade deals. It extends to military and political support. In return for its security assistance, Russia has secured valuable mining concessions in the KR, including access to diamond mines. This illustrates how Russia's investment in security and diplomacy is often linked to its economic interests.
Okay, so listening to this, you can see that this ain't just started yesterday. It's been in the work for a while. All we doing now is looking at coming to a head. So like I was saying, Lord, I hope knows exactly what he's doing. He's been orchestrating this. Any comments? Okay.
Shalom. Yes, Brother Leonard, it don't seem that they are over there trying to exploit the situation like they did in with the colonialism. They acting like they are actually being partners.
Exactly. Well, they know they have to come that route now because of where the Africans and where the people at. They're not going for no to be talked down to and be conned and all that. They ain't going for that no more. So Putin realizes that. So he have to come with them and deal with them straight up. He's still gonna benefit even if it's not going to be a situation where they pillaging like America and Europe did, but still they're going to benefit because there's so much wealth in Africa. Okay. Anybody else have anything?
Yes, sir. Well, I'm sorry, but yeah, Brother Leonard, I'm just so still amazed that all these years that these people pillaged and robbed and did everything to the land, and they still have so much abundance.
Exactly right. That's an example of. I mean, that like I said, when you look at that, where else is the Garden of Eden, and where else is Jerusalem? Everybody want to contemplate where these places at. It's got to be over there. Look at all the how that continent was blessed. So the Garden of Eden and Jerusalem has to be there. Been hiding, just like they hid the 10 tribes. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, I was telling you to keep your eyes on Trump and what was going on in South Africa, right? Check this out.
The fastest. Every successive government in the U.S. has invested heavily in expanding its military influence. This is why not only does the U.S. have the strongest military in the world, but it also has the highest number of military bases in the world. Some of these bases are located in the African continent. However, in an interesting turn of events, the administration of President Trump is currently contemplating dismantling the U.S. Africa Command, a military organization regulating the U.S. base in Africa. The question is, why is President Trump making this move? And what are the implications for the African continent? Let's find out. President Trump is not just shaking the world with his decisions, he is also shaking America. Last month, Trump fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Air Force General C.Q. Brown, and pushed out 5 other admirals and generals in an unprecedented shakeup of U.S. military leadership. This decision set off a period of upheaval at the Pentagon, which was already bracing for mass firings of civilian staff, a dramatic overhaul of its budget, and a shift in military deployments under Trump's New America First foreign policy. Following this decision, Trump's administration is currently considering a proposal to eliminate the U.S. Africa Command as part of a broader Pentagon downsizing effort. According to the reports, several U.S. defense officials are already in favor of the change. The proposed move intends to transfer AFRICOM to a subcommand position under the European Command. Those who support the move contend that moving AFRICOM under EUCOM would help simplify command structures and cut down on bureaucracy. They also believe it could make it easier for the administration to withdraw U.S. troops from certain areas in Africa, like Somalia. However, opponents have since reportedly argued that this would diminish U.S. military influence in Africa, creating a space that could be filled by Russia and China. They are also concerned that downsizing could reduce the overall influence of U.S. operations in the region. Before we proceed, here is a reminder to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel so that you can get more videos like this. What all this simply means is that the U.S. is contemplating reducing its military influence in Africa. This would mean removing its numerous military bases. However, while there is no permanent decision yet, the fact that Trump is even considering it is quite interesting. You see, the U.S. currently has the highest number of military bases and troops in Africa. It has 7,000 military personnel on rotational deployment in Africa. These troops supposedly carry out joint operations with African forces against extremists or jihadists. In addition to this, 2,000 American soldiers are involved in training missions in 40 African countries. American special forces operate across East Africa in so-called forward operation locations in Kenya and Somalia. Interestingly, the media used to publish that the USA only has one permanent camp in Africa located in Djibouti, known as Camp Lemonnier, but a 2019 document that was recently leaked revealed that the US has a total of 29 bases located in 15 different countries in Africa. Imagine that. Now, overseeing all these bases is the United States Africa Command, known as AFRICOM. Prior to the establishment of the US AFRICOM in 2007, the US already had a military presence on the African continent. It included the Combined Joint Task Force Horn of Africa, which has 700 troops at Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti, the Trans-Sahara Counterterrorism Initiative, and the US Naval Forces with a presence in the Gulf of Guinea, where oil supplies are becoming increasingly important to the US. All of these US military were under a partnership with the European military. The African continent was divided into 3 different military commands, just like during the scramble for Africa. The US European Command, EUCOM, was responsible for the largest swath of the continent, namely North Africa, West Africa, and Central and Southern Africa. The US Central Command, CENTCOM, covered the Horn of Africa, including Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Kenya, Djibouti, Sudan, Egypt, and the Seychelles, while the US Pacific Command was responsible for Madagascar and the Indian Ocean area off the African coast. During this period, the military presence of the United States in Africa could be regarded as light. In fact, Africa was not a top priority for the US government and its military at this time. However, it became necessary for the US to create a separate military organization that would answer directly to the US government when it became obvious that Africa's geostrategic significance was on the rise and the US influence was on the decline. Missions across the African continent. And let's say they were not aware. Why couldn't they have eliminated the threat of these terrorists when they just started? It's just obvious that fighting terrorism was just an excuse given to the public as to why the US needed to create AFRICOM. As we said, AFRICOM is solely in Africa to promote American interests, which doesn't have anything to do with terrorism. Specifically, AFRICOM is present in Africa for resource exploitation. Africa is the world's second largest continent in terms of landmass and population, with a large range of important natural resources. The container alone holds 30% of all mineral reserves, 12% of known oil reserves, 8% of known natural gas, and 65% of the world's arable land.
Okay, any comments on that? Okay.
Well, sound like it's a good thing if they are stepping out of Africa.
Yeah, yeah, but they got some. They got some. They got some going on. It ain't been revealed yet, but there's something going on with that. It's just like this right here. Well, I just need to know information. With I keep on saying I'm kind of not really talking about it, but it's with Tory, right? And that Pan Africanism, right? That's not Pan Africanism is not part of the scriptures. But let's check it out and you see what I'm talking about.
Part of Africa, where the sun rises over vast golden plains and the spirit of resilience echoes through the land. Two warriors of African liberation, separated by time but united in purpose, emerge as symbols of
African liberation. This Pan Africanism.
hope. One was Marcus Garvey, the Jamaican visionary who ignited the Pan-African movement in the early 20th century, calling for Black unity, self-reliance, and an end to colonial domination. The other, a modern-day revolutionary, Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, who in the 21st century reignited the flames of sovereignty by challenging neo-colonial influences and reclaiming Africa for its people. Though they lived in different eras, their spirits walked the same path, the struggle for African independence, dignity, and self-determination. This is the story of how their visions intertwine in the grand narrative of Africa's fight for liberation. In the early 1900s, Marcus Garvey rose from the shores of Jamaica to become the most prominent voice of Pan-Africanism. He believed Africa was for Africans and sought to unify Black people under one economic and political power. Through the Universal Negro Improvement Association, UNIA, he preached Black pride, economic independence, and repatriation to Africa. He saw the shackles of colonialism and racism not just as physical chains, but as mental barriers that had to be shattered. Garvey's greatest mission was the Back to Africa movement, where he envisioned a free Africa, ruled by its own people, thriving economically without Western exploitation. His steamship company, the Black Star Line, symbolized the journey home, both physically and mentally. But the colonial powers and Western elites saw him as a threat. They dismantled his movement, imprisoned him, and exiled him. However, his vision never died. It became a seed planted in the hearts of future African revolutionaries. Years passed, and Africa's struggle for independence gained momentum. From Kwame Nkrumah to Thomas Sankara, leaders emerged who carried Garvey's torch. But even after independence, neocolonialism kept Africa in chains. Western powers controlled economies, dictated policies, and used puppets to suppress true liberation. Born in Burkina Faso, a land once led by the legendary Thomas Sankara, Traoré grew up understanding the weight of colonial legacies. He joined the military, not as an agent of oppression, but as a student of revolution. He saw how his people suffered under corrupt leaders who bowed to foreign interests. Like Garvey, he believed Africa belonged to Africans. He understood that true independence was not just political, but economic and cultural as well. In 2022, at the young age of 34, he led a revolution that overthrew the neocolonial system in Burkina Faso. His goal was clear: reclaim Burkina Faso's sovereignty, sever ties with exploitative foreign forces, and uplift his people through self-reliance and its people. Today, the chains are less visible, but just as strong. The IMF and World Bank impose economic policies that keep African nations dependent. Multinational corporations extract Africa's resources while leaving little for the local populations. Military interventions disguised as peacekeeping operations maintain Western influence. Traoré, much like Garvey, understands that independence is meaningless without control over resources and governance. His decision to expel French troops from Burkina Faso was a bold declaration of sovereignty. His alliance with Mali and Niger to form the Alliance of Sahel States is an attempt to build an independent African power bloc, free from foreign interference. But the road ahead is dangerous.
The forces of neocolonialism will not sit idly by while Africa reclaims its power. Economic sanctions, propaganda campaigns, coup attempts, these are the tools used to undermine African leaders who refuse to be puppets of the West. Garvey always emphasized that true power lies in the people. His movement was not just about political leaders, but about ordinary Africans and the global Black community reclaiming their dignity.
Okay, any comments on that?
Shalom. I saw an article earlier today where they were saying the IFI and the World Bank was just like the next layer to try to come after those countries that wasn't falling in line and trying to figure out a way to get them back in the positions that they were in, but they wasn't falling for it. But it's just interesting to see how wave after wave of all these other things they used to do, they keep trying to put them in place, but they're not working.
Exactly, right, yeah. And like I was saying the other day, I don't know if anybody saw it or whatever, but they sent this guy over there posing as a businessman, Saudi businessman, I think it was, but he was special forces. But they called it, they picked it out before he was able to. They had sent him over there, to evidently to assassinate Torah. But they peeped game and they figured out he wasn't who he said he was, and then they come to find out he was a special forces, black ops. Okay, so yeah. Anybody else have any comments or questions on that?
Yeah, well, Brother Leonard, you said earlier, there's that a part of the Pan Africanism that's going on over there that you say is not scripture?
No, they saying that if you go back to Africa, African people in Egypt, it was that know thyself and self empowerment. They don't believe in the Creator, the Lord of hosts. So Pan Africanism is that we got to free our own self. That's what Pan Africanism. That's what Garvey and all these Boule and all them they tied to Pan Africanism. Is exclude the Creator and exclude the Lord of hosts. They're not dealing with, but what they doing, they trying just like with you see Islam done. They started trying to fuse Islam with Christianity and with the Torah, and so you see they doing the same thing now with this, using they using scriptures, but actually it's Pan Africanism because like I said, the star, that black star that you see on the flag in Ghana, that's the same black star that was on those 3 ships that Marcus Garvey had to come and pick the people up and bring them to deliver them back to America. I mean, back to Africa, which is Pan Africanism, and this movement now, with all the people leaving. It's actually under the guise of Pan Africanism. You got people that have waking up and thinking that they know that they Israelites and all that, but they actually participating in what these people got going on, which is African liberation, which is Pan Africanism. Like I said, they calling us the African diaspora. We're not the African diaspora. When you understand our story, we fled from out of Israel into Africa, and that's when they came and got us from Africa. But we're not African. That's the reason I'm always playing the song I Am Shem. The lady always singing the song I Am Shem, saying that they got me out of Africa, but I'm Shem. I'm not African. I'm an Israelite. And that's a major problem. That's just as big as worshiping JC. A lot of people don't understand it.
Yeah, shalom. Now, Brother Leonard, I guess that's like a double-edged sword. They are doing something to regain identity, but it's not in line with the prophecy, so it's not destined to be successful.
Well, right. Well, but he's going to use that. When you understand how the Creator works, he's using that to deliver us. You know what I'm saying? He's gonna be, it's like I was saying, Cyrus. All that he done for us, but Cyrus was wicked as hell. Nebuchadnezzar was wicked as hell, but he used them to deliver us. That's what's going over so many people here today, that Putin and this Chinese president, they're not on the world scene doing what they're doing on accident. This has happened before. They being used as deliverers, but they wicked as hell. And when he finished dealing with them, then he judged them. That's an ongoing process when you look back in our history. Is there something? Okay, we'll open it up for some Q&A. Anybody have any questions, comments about anything they want to talk about before we go into the lesson? Any comments about anything?
Shalom, Brother Leonard. So, from what we are talking about, the Pan-Africanism and all, these are not necessarily Hebrew Israelites. They are Africans, and we know it's a difference in that. But so they're not Hebrew Israelites.
Yeah, a lot of them are, but like I was saying, a lot of them are Hebrew Israelites, but they're lacking the knowledge. They're lacking, like I was saying, you got, which is thousands of people, millions, really hundreds of thousands of people waking up, but they're not advancing because they're waking up, and then they get puffed up on the fact that they found out they're Israelites when they have to. The reason he's waking us up now is for us to find out who our power is. Our power been denigrated. The Lord of hosts is our power. So they wake up, they go right into these camps, go into dealing with JC, Yahushua, when JC in Christianity is the same as Yahushua is in with Israelites, Hebrew Israelites. The Black Jesus, they're all the same. It's a character that these Edomites concocted, and it's a blockade. They're waking up, but they're not going back, returning to the power that delivered us out of Egypt. They're getting caught up in these other ideologies, like, for example, Pan-Africanism, which is concocted by Africans, the so-called African Americans. They're being caught up in snares. But it ain't no big thing because, like I said, we seen his power, what he's capable of doing. We saw how over and over again how he delivered us. And he dealt with the unrighteous and he delivered the righteous. So the righteous is going to get delivered from all the tricks and snares that they got set up when it's all said and done. Anybody else got anything? Okay, I'm gonna play this little story right here, and then I'm gonna go into the lesson. Okay. Okay.
In the heart of Atlanta, Georgia, an old woman named Mama Celeste sat on her front porch, gently rocking back and forth. Her wrinkled hands clutched a faded photograph, an image of her great-grandmother, who had once been a slave on a cotton plantation. The wind carried the scent of magnolia trees, and as she gazed at the picture, she could almost hear the whispers of her ancestors calling her home. "One day, child," she often told her grandson Malik, "the river always returns to the ocean, and we too will return to Africa." Malik never paid much attention to those words.
So this is a prime example right here. They know that we was taken from the west coast of Africa, thinking that we Africans. We're not Africans. We got a history before we ended up on the west coast. Okay.
Until the world around him began to change. Malik was a young man of 28, a gifted filmmaker and an activist. He had grown up in America, feeling both at home and like a stranger in his own land. He had read history books that spoke of his ancestors arriving in chains, but those books never told the full story.
Exactly.
They never spoke of the proud kings and queens of the Malian Empire, the Dogon priests who read the stars, or the Ashanti warriors who resisted colonial rule. Then in 2020, a wave of unrest swept through the United States. Protests filled the streets, voices cried out for justice, and Malik found himself at the center of it all, documenting the movement. But in the midst of the struggle, he began to feel an overwhelming sense of exhaustion, a longing for something he couldn't quite name. One night he sat beside Mama Celeste as she hummed an old African spiritual. "Why do you always sing that song, Grandma?" he asked. "Because it's a song of return," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Our people didn't just leave Africa. Baby, they were stolen, and now many are finding their way back." That night, Malik couldn't sleep. He started researching the stories of African Americans who had left the U.S. to start new lives in Ghana, Senegal, and Tanzania. He watched interviews of people who spoke of feeling whole for the first time, of standing barefoot on African soil and weeping because they could finally breathe. And then he came across something that shook him to his core: DNA tracing. Within weeks, Malik had taken a test that traced his roots back to the Yoruba people of Nigeria and the Fanti people of Ghana. He stared at the results in disbelief. He had always known he was African, but now it was no longer just an idea, it was real. And so he made a decision. "I'm going to Africa," he told Mama Celeste. She smiled, as if she had been waiting for this moment his entire life. Malik's plane landed in Accra, Ghana, and the moment he stepped off, a strange thing happened. He felt something shift inside him. The air smelled of salt and spice. The people looked like him, and everywhere he turned, he saw faces that mirrored his own. He spent the first few weeks traveling the country, visiting Cape Coast Castle, where his ancestors had been held before being shipped across the Atlantic. As he walked through the dungeons, his chest tightened with pain. But then something unexpected happened. He felt a presence, as if the spirits of those who had come before him were watching, whispering, welcoming him home. That night, Malik stood on the beach, letting the waves wash over his feet. He thought about the people who had been forced onto ships, never to return, but now here he was returning for them. From Ghana, he traveled to Nigeria, where he was welcomed by Yoruba elders who embraced him as one of their own. He learned the traditions, the language, the songs that had once been stolen from his ancestors. And for the first time in his life, he felt whole. Africa was rich, not just in resources, but in spirit, in resilience, in the power of its people. "He fights for us," Malik whispered to himself. "For Africa, for our future." The voice of the diaspora, African Tigress. Malik had been following African Tigress for years. Her powerful voice echoed across the internet, urging African descendants to return and reclaim what was always theirs. Through her travels, she exposed the truth. Africa was not just war and poverty, as the Western media had portrayed. It was vibrant, full of opportunity, waiting for its lost children to come back. Her journey inspired many, and Malik had been one of them. She had shown him that repatriation was not just a dream, but a reality. Through her, he saw thriving businesses, happy returnees, and a continent embracing its sons and daughters once more. She's a bridge, Malik thought, a lighthouse guiding us home. If there was one person who had opened Malik's eyes to the true beauty of Africa, it was Black Geo, through his lens. The continent was a masterpiece, its landscapes, its people, its cultures, all woven together in a breathtaking tapestry. Black Geo didn't just show Africa. He felt it. His content wasn't about tourism. It was about identity, belonging, and breaking the chains of colonial narratives.
Okay. Any comments on that? That was an emotional story why thousands of Black Americans are moving to Africa, in case you want to watch it. Okay. Nobody have any comments, or maybe we're going to go into I'm going in the book of Nehemiah, and I'm going to shine a light on the fact that about the Shabbat, because you got a lot of discussions going on about how to keep the Shabbat and when is Shabbat, and all that. So we're going to look at the story right here, and then we're going to come to conclusion. There you go. I talked about this before, but
Could New be?
I don't know if anybody really remembered. Okay.
If feet are numb and the sensation won't go away.
Okay.
Walking through the streets of Jerusalem, once a city of glory, now a shadow of its former self. The great walls that once stood as a symbol of God's protection.
So I talked about this morning, how those 3 waves, the Israelites coming back from captivity in Babylon. The first wave was Zerubbabel and Joshua. Then the second wave was Nehemiah, which is what this is about. So I'm giving you the content.
Lay in ruins, stones scattered like the remnants of a forgotten covenant. The people, weary from years of exile, had returned home.
70 years.
But home was not as they left it. The temple stood, but worship had grown cold. The city was being rebuilt, but the heart of the nation, their faithfulness to God's commandments, was crumbling. And in the midst of this decline, one sign of their spiritual decay stood out above the rest. The Sabbath had been forgotten. When Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem, he expected to see a people renewed, a nation eager to restore their identity as God's chosen. But instead, what he saw broke him. Nehemiah 13:15-16 records his words. In those days saw I in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves and lading asses, as also wine, grapes, and figs, and all manner of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals. There dwelt men of Tyre also therein, which brought fish and all manner of ware, and sold on the Sabbath unto the children of Judah and in Jerusalem.
So let's look at that. So we talk about this, like I said, it's so much that's encompassed in this, me continually talking about who Zerubbabel is, day 9:25. So right here, they're not keeping the Sabbath, but look at the money, look what they're doing. And you come down to the day. Look what they're doing. They're selling all this stuff on the Shabbat. Now they can do that, but Israel not supposed to be doing it. But they're selling all this stuff on Shabbat. So back to what I was saying about the dragon, right? In the tower. There's a woman up in the top of the tower, the dragon down in the bottom, and what the dragon got? All the merchandise. Because he getting it illegally. He getting it against the Most High's law, statutes, and judgments. So when Ezra got back, they got back and they started building the temple, we saw in the book of Ezra where they sent letters back to Darius telling him they back. They trying to rebuild the temple. It's called this right here. They was making all kind of money off of us right now. They got us doing the same thing over in America. It's a big bustling community over there making money off of us. That's the reason they don't want us to leave. So they sent letters to Darius telling them, no, they back trying to rebuild a temple. So if they rebuild a temple, then what they're going to do, they're going to reinstitute the Most High's law, statutes, and judgments. They're going to reinstitute the Shabbat. They don't want that. Okay?
Nehemiah did not find a people honoring God's holy day. He found business as usual. Markets were bustling, coins exchanging hands, and merchants from Tyre, outsiders with no regard for God's law.
Remember the Prince of Tyre? There you go.
Had infiltrated the sacred city, selling their goods without restraint. The Sabbath, once a divine covenant between God and his people, had become just another day for profit and trade. But this was not just an economic issue. This was a spiritual crisis.
Right.
This wasn't the first time Israel had fallen into this sin. The Sabbath was a sign of their covenant with God, Exodus 31:13, a command given not just for rest, but as a reminder of their Creator and Redeemer.
Right.
Yet time and time again, when Israel turned away from God, Sabbath breaking was one of the first signs of their rebellion. Through the prophet Jeremiah, God had...
So like I was saying before, once you get to a certain point with your understanding, how can JC be our God when Christianity tied to Sunday? They didn't kill the Sabbath. How can he be the God of Israelites? When the God of Israelites, he's the God of the Sabbath, of the Shabbat. In a way, he's the one. You can see that all has been concocted and manipulated. And we've been taken away from true understanding of what made us who we were back in the day when we was a people strong and mighty with the Lord also over us. They took all that away. We're doing the same thing now. When you look at Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and all them, how they getting their money? Because they got us over here. We ain't keeping the Shabbat. They're making a killing off us on the Shabbat. Okay? That's why Constantine did it. Changed it from Saturday to Sunday.
Had warned his people. Jeremiah 17:21-27. Thus saith the Lord, take heed to yourselves, and bear no burden on the Sabbath day, nor bring it in by the gates of Jerusalem. Neither carry forth a burden out of your houses on the Sabbath day, neither do ye any work, but hallow ye the Sabbath day, as I commanded your fathers. But they obeyed not, neither inclined their ear, but made their necks stiff, that they might not hear, nor receive instruction. And what was the consequence? Destruction. God explicitly warned that if they continued profaning the Sabbath, the gates of Jerusalem would burn with unquenchable fire, Jeremiah 17:27. And history proved his words true. When Babylon came, when the temple was destroyed, when the people were led away in chains, it was not simply because of military defeat, but because of spiritual apostasy.
Exactly.
Nehemiah knew this. He had read the scrolls, studied the prophets, and understood that their exile was not just a political tragedy. It was divine judgment for their disobedience. And now, after God had mercifully brought them back, they were walking the...
So when judgment, which has already started, when it comes to a head, it's going to be so ugly. So why? These people, these so-called people like Elon Musk and all them, just like he just said with Nehemiah, he studied. They got the records. These Edomites, these bankers, millionaire bankers and all them, they had the records. They read them, just like Jeremiah and Ezra, and studying them. They know about the Shabbat. That's how they got the wealth. But they keeping it from his people. So when destruction comes, it's going to be so ugly. And that's the reason being, because they know.
Same dangerous path again. Could history be about to repeat itself? Now pause for a moment. This is not just a story from ancient times. This is our story.
Exactly.
Today, the world moves at a relentless pace. Work schedules are demanding. Entertainment is constant, and life is filled with distractions. The Sabbath, a day set apart for worship, rest, and reflection, has been reduced to a personal preference rather than a divine command.
Right.
We're Phoenix Energy, a family-owned oil.
Okay.
See it as an outdated tradition, while others treat it as a day for catching up on errands, entertainment, and business.
Right.
But God's command has not changed. The same call to remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. Exodus 28 still stands today. Nehemiah's time was not unique. The same spiritual decline that led to Sabbath breaking in his day is happening now.
Exactly.
And just as Nehemiah stood against the tide of compromise, God is calling his people to stand once again. But Nehemiah did not just lament this crisis. He took action. He did not accept the situation as inevitable. He understood that revival was possible, but it required bold leadership, unwavering faith, and a return to God's law. But what exactly did Nehemiah do? How did he restore the sacredness of the Sabbath? His actions were not passive. They were bold, uncompromising, and even confrontational. Let's see how one man's determination changed an entire city. The sun was beginning to set over Jerusalem, casting long shadows across the city walls. The air was thick with the sounds of merchants calling out their last deals, carts rattling over stone streets, and the chatter of buyers eager to make one more trade before the day was done.
Wall Street.
It was the eve of the Sabbath, but for many, it had become just another evening of business as usual. Nehemiah stood at the heart of the city, watching with a heavy heart. Had they already forgotten? Had they not learned from the suffering of their ancestors? The Sabbath was not just a law, it was a covenant, a sacred sign between God and his people. Exodus 31:13. And yet, here they were, profaning it as though it were nothing. The same sins that had led to their exile were creeping back into their midst. But Nehemiah was not a man who turned a blind eye to sin. He had come to Jerusalem to restore not just its walls, but its faith. The Sabbath was at the core of that restoration. Nehemiah did not start with the common people. He went straight to the ones who should have known better. The nobles of Judah, the leaders of the city, were complicit in this neglect. They had allowed the market to thrive on the Sabbath, had turned away from the sacred duty of guarding God's law. And so Nehemiah confronted them, his voice sharp with conviction. What evil?
So I want to shine a light on something right quick. So remember, before they went into captivity, the Most High had Jeremiah to look at the people, and he said, "There's some good figs and bad figs." He took the good fig out. Nebuchadnezzar came and got the good fig, took them to Babylon for their good. So these people that's there that defile the Sabbath to the point to where it's at, that's the wicked fig that was left there. We're in the same situation now.
Evil thing is this that ye do, and profane the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers thus, and did not our God bring all this evil upon us, and upon this city? Yet ye bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath. Nehemiah 13:17-18. This was not a mild rebuke. It was a warning, one rooted in history. Nehemiah reminded them that their ancestors had ignored God's commands, and their disobedience had led to destruction. The Babylonian exile had been no accident. It was the direct result of their unfaithfulness, Jeremiah 17:21-27. And yet, here they were, walking the same dangerous path. Nehemiah's words cut deep, but words alone were not enough. Action was needed. Nehemiah knew that if he was to restore the Sabbath, he had to take drastic measures. He commanded that the city gates be shut before the Sabbath began, and not reopened until it was over. Nehemiah 13:19. This was no small decision. The gates of Jerusalem were the lifeline of trade and commerce. Merchants relied on them to bring in their goods, farmers to sell their harvest, craftsmen to sustain their livelihood. To shut the gates meant cutting off a stream of economic activity. It was bound to cause resistance. But Nehemiah understood something that many had forgotten. Obedience to God was more valuable than profit.
Right.
The Sabbath was not just a day of rest, it was a symbol of trust.
Right.
To cease from labor was to acknowledge that God was the provider, that man does not live by bread alone. Deuteronomy 8:3. So the gates were shut, the streets emptied. Jerusalem, for the first time in years, began to taste what true Sabbath keeping was meant to be. But the merchants were not so easily deterred. They camped outside the walls, waiting for the Sabbath to end. They positioned themselves near the gates, hoping that someone would come out, hoping that trade could still take place in secret. Perhaps they thought Nehemiah would back down. that he would grow tired of enforcing these restrictions.
We want to be part of something. We want to be part of something big.
So like I said before, these ain't no Israelites, and that's where we're going wrong here, because we trying to operate like them, and we ain't none of them. They don't give a damn about the Sabbath, so they steady trying to find a way to make transactions and make money, irregardless to the Shabbat. And that's where we at now. That's what keep getting us in trouble. We keep trying to operate like them. We've been brainwashed that we like them. We're not like them.
Nehemiah was not a man to be intimidated. He saw them waiting and issued a warning. Why lodge ye about the wall? If ye do so again, I will lay hands on you. Nehemiah 13:21. This was not an empty threat. Nehemiah was prepared to use force if necessary. He was not merely suggesting that they respect the Sabbath, he was ensuring that it was kept holy. His actions were bold, unyielding, and deeply unpopular among those whose profits were at stake. Yet this is what true faithfulness looks like. Sometimes, standing for God's commandments means standing against the crowd. Sometimes, obedience comes with opposition. Nehemiah understood that reform had to go beyond just shutting gates. The Sabbath was not only about preventing work, it was about sanctifying the people. So he turned to the Levites, the spiritual leaders of Israel.
There we go. Levites, servant,
and commanded them to purify themselves and stand guard over the city. Nehemiah 13:22. Why was this necessary? Because
so notice what we talked about that this morning. Cleansing. So it's a process. We ain't doing it, but it's a process. Cleanse yourself and prepare yourself to deal with the Creator or with the Lord of hosts.
Spiritual leadership matters. The people would only take the Sabbath seriously if their leaders did. And so, Nehemiah ensured that those who ministered in God's name were set apart, clean, and ready to uphold his law. This is a lesson for today. If we want to see revival, it must begin with those who lead. Whether in churches, homes, or communities, those who carry the truth must live it. A holy Sabbath requires a holy people. Nehemiah's story is not just history, it is a call to action. But Nehemiah wasn't just enforcing an ancient law. He was upholding something deeply tied to God's original design. The Sabbath was not merely a Jewish custom, it was a divine institution established at creation, Genesis 2:2-3. And centuries later, Jesus himself would reaffirm its purpose, not as a burden, but as a blessing.
Okay, you're gonna cut it off right there. Anybody got any comments or questions on that? So, like I was saying, notice how what he did was at evening, he closed the doors. He closed the doors to the Jerusalem. So you got this big debate going on that when the Sabbath started and when it ended. At evening, he closed the gates. And then at evening the following day is when he opened them back up. So they ain't hard to figure out when the Sabbath is a 24-hour process. He said 40 days and 40 nights. The water rain. So a day is 12 hours of light and 12 hours of darkness. So, you know what I'm saying? Like I said, when you really want to get the understanding of certain topics, it's right there in the scriptures. You just got to dig into you, and Most High going to reveal them to you. Believe that. Okay. Any comments or questions about anything you just heard? You want to talk about it?
Shalom, brother Leonard. To me, that kind of makes sense. Like in the creation story, when they say the evening, what he said, evening in the morning was the first day.
Right. So the evening is the darkness The morning is the light. That's a complete day. Same what we just saw Nehemiah do when he reinstituted the Shabbat. And like I said, Friday evening, because Friday day is actually Friday day is actually Thursday. Third day, the day came. Then the evening comes is when the Shabbat starts. Then you preparing, and then when the daylight comes the next day is when the Sabbath starts. I mean Sabbath day, the light starts. And then at the evening when when the sun starts going down, the Shabbat is over. So it's from evening to evening. And that's what he just done. Shut the gates at evening, then he reopened the gates at evening. And force them to keep the Shabbat. Okay. Anybody got any questions? Any other questions, comments on that? Okay. Anybody got a scripture they want to bring up? We can break it down, or we're gonna cut it off right here. Okay. So, like I said, with that being said, this is our evening Shabbat class. I'll see everybody on tomorrow. We got our advanced Bible study at 5 p.m. Central Time tomorrow. If you want to engage, I'll see everybody then. Shalom, shalom, and another shalom.
Shalom, everyone.
Shalom.
I highly recommend that you get this book and you read it, because it's a must that you understand who God head is in the order that's in the Old Testament and Tanakh, because it's not the same as in the New Testament. And when you read this and you get an understanding, then